What a moment.
Guess we jump right in, huh?
Yeah, for sure.
All right.
So here we are in episode number one.
Here we are in episode number one of
To
that's
be
that's gonna be the
confirmed.
that's gonna be the voiceover actor that we're going to hire, who's also going to figure out what the title of the show is for us. So we'll fix that in post. All right. So this track is "Heart of the Sunrise" by Yes, and Yes is a band that I was quite obsessed with as a teenager, as a young lad. Um, So, a little background on my relationship with Yes, which is not personal in any way. I don't know them. Um, my dad had like all of their LPs on vinyl back in the day. So, like, even as like a toddler growing up, like Roundabout would just be playing, in the background of while I was playing with my toy dump trucks or whatever. And so it's always kind of been a part of my life. But then my dad, who is also a musician, in a stroke of genius, as I was taking
Hang on a
piano,
minute.
uh-huh,
What kind of musician was your dad?
he started out playing trumpet in band through like high school and everything, and then
Yeah.
he went into choral music in college, and he got his degree in choral conducting, and taught high school choral music for a number of years as well. So yeah, he's a very good musician. Big influence on me growing up as well. He plays guitar now. Yeah, still very active. Yeah,
That was
so
my next question, was to find out what he's doing now.
yeah,
So
he actually retired from the post office, so he ended up not staying in music. He was the smarter of us and decided, it might be best to make some money. So, it was before streaming royalties paid us the incredible wages that they do now. But that's another story entirely. Um, yeah. So anyway, um, he was a big Yes fan uh, growing up. They're obviously more from his era, right? The early '70s, um, and he was in kind of a brilliant move as piano lessons started to become more difficult, and I was like in the beginning phases of like I want to quit. This is too hard. I have to practice now, right?
yeah.
He kind of reintroduced me to these guys who were like, whatever you think of the music, they're all virtuosos. I know Prague gets kind of a reputation for being over the top, and there's so many ideas that they're exploring. Less is more was not a concept that they, fooled around with too much. Um, but they're all incredible players and incredible musicians individually, and then when they all come together, you know, their playing was so tight, and it was like, oh, well, what are these synthesizers that this guy's playing? And so that was kind of early on my introduction into that, and of course that's kind of gone in a different direction for me later in life too. But this is kind of where it all started. So kind of got me interested early on, not only in kind of virtuosic playing, which related to my classical piano study, but sound exploration as well, because a lot of the
Yeah.
stuff was kind of
Yeah.
out there at the time. Um, so yeah, that
So wait a minute.
yeah.
How old were you when when you mentioned that you were sort of like, I don't want to practice, it's getting hard, and you got reintroduced to this? How old were you
Yeah,
then?
I was probably around 12 or 13, you know.
Okay.
Up until that point, I guess I had enough talent at piano that everything was just kind of, but then as the literature and the rep gets harder and harder, there comes a point in everyone's life where they must practice, right? Unfortunately. So, yeah, when I hit that wall, it was like, oh no, this isn't fun anymore. So, time to quit, right? I guess that's just, the mantra of every 13-year-old, but yeah, this kind of re-energized me. And then, of course, I was like totally obsessed with I thought I was going to be in a progressive rock band. Unfortunately, it was the early 2000s, and none of them existed anymore. So yeah, um, yeah. So anyway, I guess probably the best thing to do now would be just to listen to the track, and then you can kind of tell me what your thoughts are about it, as will be the premise of this show going forward.
Let's do it.
Yeah. All right. So this is Heart of the Sunrise by Yes, and here we go. You know what? I'm just going to restart that because it was already playing from before.
Yeah.
We'll fix it in post.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Love the bass tone.
Oh man. It's like turned this corner where I have no idea where it's going now. Like
Yeah,
before
sure.
I was settled and then
This mix is really incredible too.
just love the way the drummer's playing around the beat, man. It's just
Bill Bruford was a jazz drummer who then got into rock. So, you can tell. Starting to layer those themes already. It's very kind of classical methodology, where they bring back themes and interweave them.
oh wow, okay.
Hey, we're back.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah. One of the things that I like about them is they'll bring it down too.
I love bands that play with dynamics in the maximum way they can.
Lose one onto the heart of the sunrise. Lost on a wave, then after dream on.
So we have the bass playing that melody.
The sunrise. Sharp distance. How can the wind with so many around me? Lost in the
Such a nasty bass tone, but it fits so well. Chris Squire, he was really influential on Geddy Lee of Rush, just for that kind
Oh.
of aggressive bass tone. I think he used a lot of guitar amps in addition to the bass amps.
Okay, wow.
as you hurry by, counting the broken ties they decide. Love comes to you, and then
A lot of different key areas explored.
dream on.
This is not drone ambient, is it?
The sunrise. Onto the
Little mini mode going on there.
sunrise.
It is the 70s.
Lost in your eyes as you hurry by, counting the broken ties they decided.
And we're back.
Wow, the dynamics.
I mean, you know, this was all recorded to tape,
Yeah.
so they had to learn this, you know,
Moving sharpness of the color sunshine.
and play it.
Straight light searching all the meanings of the song.
I like the harmonies here.
Last treatment of the telling that relates to all the words. Song. Dreamer,
Yeah.
easy in the chair that really fits you.
And
Yeah, it's all from before.
yeah.
It's like development.
Love comes to you, and then after, dream on to the heart of the sunrise. Sharp distance. How can the wind with its arms all around me?
Vocal just soars over the top. I love it.
Distance.
Oh yeah.
How can the wind with so many around me? I feel lost in the city.
Yeah. So that's it.
Wow.
So I'm a bit curious now, what your impressions are of it, because it's tricky. One of the tricky things I think about this podcast is going to be like separating out what is emotional attachment with a thing from like having grown
Yeah.
up with it,
Yeah.
a-
Yeah.
apart from like, okay, what does someone else, another musician, think about, you know, what he's just heard? Because you're not familiar with this track, and
No,
not too
not at
familiar
all.
with Yes, right?
No, not at all. I wouldn't be able to. I mean, you told me a couple of days ago that it was going to be Yes. I wouldn't be able to tell you any song titles or recall anything at all. So that list, yeah, this listening was. I would liken it to the first months of trying to navigate London, and getting used to a street.
Yeah.
And you know, so you're getting into the groove, and then suddenly you turn the corner and you go, I had no idea where I'm going or where it's going to go next. So I liken it to that. But then as it went on, I started hearing those themes. But I thought they were banging musicians. I loved the dynamics, absolutely loved the dynamics, and I fully appreciate that they were doing this. As you said, to tape. So it's to be honest, you know, I didn't know anything by them, but I'm now fascinated to go and find out more. I mean, what album is that from? And
That is from
what
the
would you
album.
recommend us
Yeah,
start?
that's a great album to start with. It's called Fragile, not to be
Yeah.
confused with The Fragile, which is something else.
Yes.
We'll get to that later.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's a great one. That was the first album. They had done 3 albums to that point. They formed around 69. This one came out in 72. But this was kind of the album. It was the first album where they had this keyboard player and this guitarist together. They had a lot of lineup changes through the years. So they went through several like different iterations. There's even like a 80s Yes. You probably heard Honor of a Lonely Heart before. It's a very different kind of band. It's very 80s, but
Okay.
still very fine musicianship, but more of a pop sensibility about it.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, they went through a lot of transformations, but this was the lineup that was always kind of my favorite growing up. Steve Howe on guitar, Rick Wakeman on keyboards, and you heard a lot of Mellotron in there,
Yeah.
probably. Um,
Yeah.
he was well known as like one of the Mellotron player because I've heard him talk in an interview about he knew something about how the voice stealing worked in a way, and then he wouldn't tell anyone else because he didn't want them taking his work.
Oh wow.
So
Okay.
he did a lot. He did a lot of session work for Bowie, actually. Life on Mars, the Mellotron in there. That's Rick Wakeman.
Yeah.
Um,
I know his name.
yeah,
I wouldn't have been able to recall anything, but yeah. Sorry, carry on.
yeah. I mean, he did like "Morning Is Broken" by Cat Stevens. That the piano on that was Rick Wakeman. Yeah, done a lot of session work over the years. Probably best known for Yes, though, as like he like would wear a cape and he had like 12 synthesizers and keyboards like stacked around him. Um, well, like that. He had a lot. He had a lot more than I do. So that was kind of. I looked at him at the time, as a 13-year-old, and was like, "Wow, that guy's cool." I need a cape. I still need a cape.
Listen, there wasn't any YouTube and stuff like that. So how did you consume the music? Did you watch anything visually, or was it
My
just
dad,
audio?
as I mentioned, my dad had all the records, so the Yes album art was really unique as well. They had like their own graphic artist, who did really interesting things. Roger Dean, I think was his name. It's like really futuristic looking stuff. So along with that, hearing those sounds for the first time, it was like, going on what I imagine going on a trip would be like for for a 13-year-old. Um, but yeah, so that it was, just looking at the pictures of them, and like he had some of the box sets, like the best of stuff as well, that had like more of their history and stuff, more detailed and laid out. And then like we were getting into the early days of the internet, so I was able to kind of, you know, look at forums of, Yes fans and that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
no YouTube, but and he had a couple of like VHS of concerts, so I was able to watch them, do their thing live. Incredible live band too. And that goes back to like, yeah, you can tell how much rehearsal goes into something like that when you're recording to tape and it's that tight. So yeah, they could play live. um,
Yeah.
I can't imagine like the technical feat of like having all of those synthesizers on stage back then and having trying to keep everything working. But anyway,
Do you remember the first time hearing that track specifically, or
that one
was it just like
specifically,
a memory of it?
I spent so much time like in my bedroom, listening to all of the records that I had at my disposal. That one specifically, the first time hearing that one, I really don't recall, to be honest. I remember the first time I put on that record and listened to the whole thing all the way through. Um, and that was, yeah, that was back when you did that kind of thing. You listened from start to finish, with your headphones or with your stereo, um, and just reading the album cover,
Yeah.
and there
Yeah.
weren't all these other distractions, so you were really able to focus on it and be like, wow, I wonder how they're doing all of that, you know? Um, so yeah, and then from there, like this album would have been one of the first. This one, Close to the Edge, was another one that came out right after this, and like the first track on there is like 20 minutes long. It takes up the A side of that record. Um, it's like
Man,
a multi
okay.
movement thing, and there's this breakdown in the middle of it that's like ambient, and there's like field recording stuff in it as well. Um, so I guess that was foreshadowing, even though I don't do field recording, but um, you know, definitely into more ambient stuff these days, and they were already kind of exploring that. And you could even in this one, even though this album was a bit more straightforward rock than some of the more experimental stuff they got into later. Um, you can already hear like in some of those breakdown sections where there was like this ambient guitar in the background that he's like, I think Steve Howe would like fade in with the volume pedal, so you lost the attack and you just had that sustain. You know, he used that a lot. Um, and yeah, like the Mellotron and everything going on. So I would say as they went on with the next couple of records after this one, it got more experimental, and they kind of broke down structures even more, and were exploring even more ideas. So, um, yeah. So Fragile might be a good one to start with, or even the album before this called the Yes album is a good one. Similar in the fact that it's a bit more straightforward rock, but you can already hear them exploring different themes, and the playing is always fantastic. You know, that's one constant thing throughout. But yeah, I especially now, like since minimalism is all the rage, like going back to music like this is kind of refreshing in a way, because it's like, oh, they weren't like, I get minimalism and it's more akin to what I do now. And I certainly think that sometimes stripping things away can make something stronger. Very strongly, I believe that. But sometimes you need to just explore ideas, you know, and it's really nice that they were willing and able to do that in a way that was still very musical. And that's one other thing. I know I'm rambling on a bit now, but that's one thing that I always found about Yes was, of all the prog bands, I thought that they were one of the most musical in terms of like having really strong melodies, even though they go through a lot of them, and good
That was
harmonic
one thing I
progression.
was going to pick up on. Um, One thing I was going to pick up on was that it wasn't just like an exploration listening. There were really strong parts that when I first heard them, they felt like a hook, and then they
Hmm.
kept coming back.
Yeah,
So I felt like I was coming back home, even though it was very. I felt like it was very experimental,
yeah.
more experimental than a lot of things that I'm used to
Hmm.
listening to, especially these days.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, and they're really good about bringing back material that needs to be brought back. You know, the stronger, like you said, the hookier things, right? Um, Even though they're going through a lot of material, they give you something to kind of anchor you, which is yeah, it is a really something that I admire as a composer. Um, so yeah, um, it's really it's been interesting, like hearing your thoughts on it after me, of course, having lived with it for oh God, you know, 20 something years at this point. So
I was going to ask you, how often do you find yourself coming back to Yes? Is it
um,
constantly,
no,
or
I went away like several years. I would say in the last 10 years I haven't listened to them a lot. You know, just every once in a while I'll come back to, or if, you know, I find something on YouTube that's like a live performance I've never heard, you know, just pops up or
yeah?
something. Um, but yeah, it's been kind of, you know, as we've talked before about in just private conversations, I was classically trained, and so always had a bit of snobbery about like more popular, mainstream types of music, um, until more recently when I discovered that it's a skill in and of itself to create something that's, you know, both widely accepted but also well crafted and interesting. So uh, it's a gift that not a lot of people have. Um, so I've gotten into more, I guess, mainstream things. But yeah, I've always been kind of in the rock world, I guess, coming from Prague first. Um, so then I started listening to like Nirvana and Foo Fighters and Queens of the Stone Age and some bands that are more modern and doing things. Of course, I say more modern. I'm talking about bands that are all like, at this point, 30 years, fif- 15, 20 years old. But that's where,
Yeah,
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 that's where I've been, like when you're classically trained and you're immersed in that world for the first 20 years of your life, you miss out on some of the stuff that's going on, a lot of which, let's be honest, it's fine to miss out on.
yeah.
But yeah, I've found that there's some good stuff in there too, so I've been enjoying.
So
But
with you, so yes, and took you on to uh, the what they call the grunge era sort of bands, and then on from there, the other things to listen to as well.
yeah, once I got over the fact of, oh, these guys aren't virtuosos at their instruments, and actually started listening to, oh, that's really catchy, or that's well crafted the way that they put that song together. That was kind of my hurdle. But yeah, already being familiar with the rock instrumentation and everything from prog bands of the 70s, it was kind of an easier transition to get into later rock, I guess. Um, so yeah, that's kind of where I ended up. And then I was like, hey, is there anyone using synthesizers in an interesting way in the past 30 years that I've missed out on? Turns out there were a couple.
Yes.
So yeah, that's basically it for me. I
Thanks so much for
hope that you enjoyed,
sharing.
and I'm sorry that it took. I did pick the short one because, like I said, they get like 20 minutes and on. So I
And
picked the short one. It
did
was
you
only 10.
save me from the huge ambient ending as well when we listened?
Oh yeah, there's
Well,
a
it's not
like
huge, but there's
at the end of that record, there's like they bring back like a something from a earlier track that's just like has nothing to do with the one we just listened to. So I thought, well, we'll just leave that out.
well, really do look forward to diving in because, like you said earlier, I found it really refreshing. Um, Going into something that was so experimental like that again reminded me of what my mum and dad would listen to at home on
Hmm.
records, be it that it wasn't the same band, but
Yeah.
the sounds, some of the synthesizer sounds I could hear in early Genesis and
Hmm.
that kind of thing. So it when I heard some of those melody lines that were coming over top center in that track on the synths, um, it just immediately took me back to my living room and
Hmm.
sitting there doing something while I was hearing uh, whoever it was, but Genesis is something to spring to mind.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Well, I think, they were both of those bands were doing similar things at the same time, and I never got into Genesis as much. I went like Emerson, Lake and Palmer was another one that I listened to a lot because it was keyboard based, and of course that appealed to me. Um, and Keith Emerson and Rick Wakeman were kind of they worked pretty closely with Bob Moog in kind of giving him an artist perspective on some of those early synthesizers. Um, so I always found that interesting. I listened to Rush. I get into Rush later on, um, which you know it it was an acquired taste for me because um, they're just different. you know, it's not like yeah, it's hard to explain my transition like from Yes to Rush because Rush was more like I think when they were trying to do like the extended prog stuff, like 2112 and all of those albums back in the 70s, didn't really do much for me, but they kind of hit their stride when they shortened things down, kind of condensed it, and just focused on what they did really well, which was like really incredible musicianship. And they didn't try to do these big ambient like breakdowns in the middle because they weren't as good as Yes to me. So it
Oh,
just
right.
it didn't
Okay.
work as well to me. So yeah, when they kind of cut out the fat, as it were, in like the 80s, I guess, late 70s, that's when that's the area of Rush that I really liked. So
And yet again, Rush are another band that I wouldn't be able to recall a song, but
yeah.
I do remember that my dad had a few albums.
Hmm.
So I would love some pointers as where to start. If
Yeah,
you have
yeah,
any.
yeah. I'll send you some links, as we often do. It's so funny how we've
Yeah.
ended up kind of doing similar things musically with our own music, but from very different starting points, right? Very different backgrounds, um, it seems. So we
Yeah.
kind of ended up in a similar place, though.
Yeah. Having spent the first 15 to 20 years making music, that was all about guitar. I slowly was introduced and got into more and more um, classical and instrumental music, just from the people that I met while I was making other music.
Yeah, I guess that's about all I
Okay.
have to say about it. But I'm sure, if we keep doing these and we can't get any guests to come on and play with us, then we may have to come circle back around to these guys at some point. Because I was so torn. Like, I had to narrow it down, of course, as you know, because we're going to do your track next week, I think. And there's so many different, it's like just narrowing it down to a genre. It's like, okay, I'll do something in this style. And then it's like narrow it down to a band. It's like, okay, now what am I going to do? Just like, there's so many things to choose from. So we will never
Yeah.
run out of things to do. That's for sure.
No, but this was a fantastic place to start. I've learned a lot, and I'm looking forward to listening to music that I hadn't caught really any of before.
Same. Yeah. Well, that's the beauty of us coming from different backgrounds is, there's going to be a lot of new stuff for us both to dig through. So I'm looking forward to it as well.
Brilliant. There we go.
All right. Well, I guess that's it. And there's nothing to do at this point except the outro, which we also don't know what we're doing on. So we'll fix that in post as well. And this has been a wonderful episode of, and we will see you next time.